Trauma and the Brain. I was blown away several years ago after thorough research, realizing that when you have a traumatic childhood experience, it has a huge impact on your brain. It actually brought me to my knees for a lot of reasons, but then it made me realize that there was a reason for some inadequacies. I wasn't making excuses for my inadequacies, but it brought me to my knees. Childhood trauma on the brain, it's wow, I can't tell you the effect of it. The disclaimer, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist. The discussion I'll be having with you today is based on my thorough research as a vivid researcher and my personal experiences over the years. And I thought, wow, there must be something wrong here. And it was when I discovered that, yes, I traced my steps backwards. And then I thought, OMG. So there's a reason. I didn't want to give excuses for my inadequacies, but I just knew that there was a reason. So the brain. Okay, I have my notes here because, and there are also links. So you see my sources. I've got loads of sources, but I wasn't going to post everything. But my sources are at the bottom in the comments. So, but yes, I'll start by just saying a little bit about the brain. I'm not going to go in depth because, as I say, I'm not a doctor. This is just research. So, okay. So I will start by saying that in 1861, or no, that was Broca. So Paul Broca, the French surgeon, he sort of like discovered an area called the Broca area, and it's the frontal part of the brain. He realized that that's to do with the speech or the lack of it. Now, before I even go into what he researched and found, I'm going to talk about the three types of brain. So the parts of the brain that we actually have. And this was what blew my mind away when I started to break it down and try to relate it to the traumatic experiences I had. To be honest, I didn't even know I had traumatic experiences. Of course, I knew that I was upset a lot about a lot of things that happened to me, but it was through research I thought, so that's why ABC, but maybe not. But I'll say in the 1960s, there was an American neuroscientist. His name was or is Paul MacLean. It's known as the Triune brain model, and that Triune is three parts of the brain. So he divided them into three parts, and he said we have the reptilian or primal brain, we have the mammalian or emotional brain, and we have the neo-mammalian or rational brain. Now that is all scientific up there. So based on recent research that I've read, now discovered that there are now more understandable ways of categorizing these three parts. So we have the neocortex, which is the thinking brain. I think that's bringing it more down to our level. The thinking brain, so that's the neocortex. And that's the newest, the highest, sort of like more evolved type of brain that human beings have. And then we have the limbic. Now, I emphasize limbic because that's what my research was really, really deep into. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So we have the limbic brain, which is our doing brain. This is the emotional brain that we have. And it's the sort of like mammal brain, so us. And it's like the size of a lemon, and it's responsible for regulating our internal chemical order. So that's the limbic one. That's the second one, and that's the doing brain. We have the doing brain, and then we have the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is the being brain. So that's how we be, sort of thing. So that cerebellum is the being brain. So this is the oldest brain in evolution. and it's the seat of our subconscious mind. Now, I'm not going to go into all scientific words because you'd be like, oh, hello, I could have gone and read this one. I just want to hear stories, right? Me and you both. Okay, so today I'm just going to talk about the brain, but the limbic area, because that's what my discovery was. Intense. So why am I talking about limbic? So when I was doing my research, the reason I did some research was sort of some anomalies between how I thought I was and how I really was. So, and the reason I'm emphasizing limbic is more of our emotions. So the amygdala, I'm looking at my notes here because there's some terminologies that I'm thinking, okay, yes, what was that again? So I realized that the limbic brain has a lot to do with our emotions. So the reason I did my research was I used to study a lot. Now, if you're out there and we used to attend, I used to study really, really hard. Like I was like always going around with a cool, well, I say cool, they weren't cool, they were brainy, with the brainy guys. And yeah, so, and as I was growing up and I thought, I wasn't really what they were, but you know, I still carried on. But there were so many other things that were happening in my life. And I realized these are so inconsistent with what I am and what I'm doing. Why are they not lining up perfectly to how what I'm doing, the effort that I'm putting into stuff? So the reason I'm bringing this up today is because some children, they'll be going back to school. Some have already gone back to school. My kids, my daughter, she's going back to school next week. My son's going back at the end of the month. Now, we've all been through this unprecedented pandemic, COVID-19. Wow, express my sympathy to everyone out there who has been affected directly or indirectly. My heart goes out, and we will get through this. This too shall pass. I love you. We will get through this. So when we try and get through it as adults, as parents, it's important that we show positivity to our children. So there's been a lot of scare. I mean, of course, it's expected, but we need to put things into perspective. We need to be grateful. We need to show gratitude. We need to make the kids show gratitude. And to my kids as well, I know that I reiterate to say, just be grateful for today, that we see another day. And when they're going on about, oh, school, everyone's going to be this, we just need to try and put their minds at ease. Because why? If we don't, this period here, this is why sometimes I almost get breathless. The thought of thinking so far ahead that if we don't contain this and be positive about it, all these events that we've had will result in experiences many, many years to come. So we need to show positivity to our kids, even if, you know, we will reassure them and not reassure them too much, because even that can cause anxiety. So why am I emphasizing that? Again, it's going back to school. It's anxiety. Some children at home have had a lot of, I don't even want to go into it. They've had a lot of difficulties at home. Some might have been abused. I don't even want to go into it. I mean, that's why students were still told to go to school, because of the risk that they faced staying at home. It breaks my heart because I know exactly what they would have gone through. And it breaks my heart. And that's why this topic for me is vital. It's just at the seat of my soul. We need to stop what? Childhood traumatic experiences needs to stop now. Full stop. So back to what I'm talking about in terms of the brain. So yes, as I was saying, the limbic brain, which is the amygdala, has a lot to do with our areas of speech. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are two facets to this brain and the effect it has as childhood trauma. As a child, just talking about this all translates into traumatic experiences. So it's an event that is either physical, sexual, emotional, domestic violence at home, everything that is unexpected to a child's mind. So as a child, we're born and we have our brains. If there's no unfortunate instance or circumstance during birth, and our brains are all wired nicely, they're all there. But as a child, we need to forge new connections, and more neurons have to be formed, about 100 billion of neurons that we see sort of around the environment, so that those neurons can fire and then wire together. So neurons that fire together, they wire together. So as a child, we're forming these neurons. I'm going to use myself. So Toyin's baby, she's forming these neurons. She's seeing something new. She's excited. Oh my gosh, because that's new, right? So I'm getting those. I'm forming my neurons, 100 billion. That's all like 5,000 miles away. That's almost like from London to Nigeria is 4,000 miles. So imagine another 1,000 miles. That's how all our neurons are together, 100 billion of them. So all these neurons are forming, they're firing, they're wiring. And then I'm happy, I'm running. I will put a link here for you to see actually me run the experience as a child, as a happy child. I'm running up and down, and then something unexpected happens. What's going to happen to my brain? It's going to say, whoa, 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 what's going on? What am I doing? I was firing and wiring these lovely neurons. What have you done to me? It's going to what? It's going to take my state of being out of the homeostasis. So like a nice state of being is going to be what? Disrupted. And that's how the brain would work. So now, one of the areas that I thought, wow, this happened, was that as the Broca area is one of the speech centers of the brain. So I said that a guy, Paul Broca, he discovered this. And I'm sure some of you out there will know what is called the inescapable shock, or the shock of horror, where, you can't talk because of the shock that your brain has experienced. Now, this is one area that I researched into, and I thought, wow, Toyin, you're okay. And was okay. It was normal. Don't blame yourself that you didn't shout, or that you didn't do this, or that you didn't do that, because scientists have proven that you get into a level of inescapable shock. So that's the brain coming to an area that it's not comfortable with. And that's where the Broca, that area of speech. So, and where is that? You cannot put your thoughts and your feelings into words. That's the shock that you're experiencing. So it's normal, and you can't blame yourself, because I know, just jumping a bit to the adults, as adults we blame ourselves, or people who've experienced very traumatic events in their lives will blame themselves. Shame, there'll be guilt, because they'll feel, why did they do this, why didn't they do that? Now, one thing we all have in common is science. Our body. So if I say, oh, well, culture, we don't, religion, we don't, beliefs, we don't, that, but science, we all have that in common, right? So this does not lie. So if scientists have said that the Broca area, without that Broca area, because you've experienced something that's shocking to your brain, you have an inescapable shock, then you're okay. It was normal, not acceptable, but how you behaved was how you behaved, because of what took your state of being out of the natural homeostasis sort of like way of being. So as I said, thinking brain, the limbic, which is the doing brain, and then the cerebellum, the being brain, they weren't in sync when something happened to you. It affected the brain. So you can't blame yourself. So as a child, that's happened, and they're in total shock because of the neurons that are now refiring in a negative way. So as I said, as a child, you're sensitive. So you're going to grab everything from your environment so that you can fire those neurons so that they can wire together. So whilst that's a positive side, finding something new as a child, and you say, oh, what's that? And I'm like, as an adult, you're like, it's only a blue container. But to a child, that's exciting. So whilst that is positive, the negative aspect means that something sensitive and shocking will react in that way as well, in the negative way. And there's a popular saying, I mean, it's not popular, but Shakespeare, from Macbeth, when he said Shakespeare captured the state of speechless terror in Macbeth when the king's body was discovered. And there was that quote, which is, "Oh horror," I'm going to read it. "Oh horror, horror, horror. Tongue nor heart cannot conceive thee. Confusion now hath made his masterpiece." So it's all about speechless moments of one's life. Now I'm going to quickly look at some area here. Adverse childhood experiences and the developing brain. So it says here, it's everything that I've almost said. So for a child to develop skills such as crawling, walking, and talking, the brain must sprout millions of new cells, thousands of cells over time. So the ability of a child's brain to change is hugely beneficial, as it allows development to a credible rate. However, so this is what I said earlier, to do this, the young brain must be extremely sensitive to events occurring within its environment. So to forge new neurons for the development of a child's brain, that brain has to be sensitive. It's almost like a magnet. It's got to siphon that because it needs to forge new neurons. So, as well as increasing the brain's potential to learn, the heightened sensitivity increases the vulnerability of the brain to stressful, are commonly referred to as adverse experiences. And that's what I told you earlier. So, simply put, individuals who have experienced a number of ACEs, that's adverse childhood experiences, to be at a risk, they seem to be at a risk of developing mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. So that's for the adult bit, so I'm not going to delve into that now. This is just about the child and how these imprint in us as adults. The good news, because the bearer of good news is what I'm all about, because we need to get out of this. But I think I need to say that because if, as parents, we need to be more intentional. I know that too for myself, because if I want to, well, now that I'm getting more intentional about my actions, I think more deeply before I act or say something, and not being robotic, because, you know, you can't, oh, I'm thinking, it's learning. And then what? The neurons that fire together, they wire together, and it becomes what? My daily. In other words, we have to be more and more vigilant about how we are with our children. So for me, it's a no-brainer. We have to be more mindful of our environment and the impact it has on our children, because the inescapable shock is what happens, and that's what imprints on the brain. It's scientists that have said this. So yes, all I can say is that we need to be more mindful of how the brain reacts to the traumatic experiences as a child, and not to blame ourselves as adults, which I'll get to later, that what we experienced was our fault. No, scientists have proven that you get into a state of inescapable shock. So the fright stage, you know, it's normal. So I will end this by saying, before I go, I shall put some information up here for you to know that I too, before the trauma, you can see, you can download this, which is https:/bookhip.com/SXJP, and download your copy of Before the Trauma. That's all nice and honky-dory. The second one, childhood trauma, you'll travel with me to see the effect of, you know, different traumatic experiences. And that is https:/bookhip.com/KHAP AX, B, F for Freddy, K for Kilo. So guys, by saying, I love you. And remember, your inner child has a voice. Don't suppress it. Let it roar.